said, the violence in Gaza is beyond the threshold for self-restraint. Well, I think it's pretty serious as long as the conflict in Gaza is ongoing. I think all what you refer to as the pockets of tension throughout the region, not only on the Lebanese borders, will continue. Luckily, on our side of the border, it's still low to middle scope exchange of fire, but the situation is very serious. That's why we're looking forward for these talks to yield for a ceasefire in Gaza, and then I think our path towards de-escalation will start.
Of course, there have been Israeli strikes on Hezbollah. Do they concern you? And have you warned Hezbollah not to escalate things further?
Well, of course they concern us, especially that they've been targeting civilians deep inside Lebanese territories. A few days ago, Israel targeted civilians 60 kilometers inside Lebanese territories, and 10 people lost their lives, including women and children. Of course, the Israelis claim that they're targeting Hezbollah, but in reality, they're targeting civilians. Now, as with regard to your second question, of course, we are urging everyone to hold back and to exert self-restraint. But as you know, the conflict in Gaza is so painful and so violent that it became so difficult to contain it in its original theater of operation, which is Gaza.
Ambassador, you mentioned Israel firing rockets into Lebanese territory. It's equally true, isn't it, that Hezbollah are firing rockets into Israel and have been doing since even before October the 7th. How is it that your government in a sovereign nation can't actually stop that?
Well, since the 2006 Israeli war against Lebanon, the borders were very quiet, and we were in full respect from the Lebanese side of Resolution 1701. And there was never exchange of fire or a fire that started on our side of the border. Until October the 7th, as you know, it started as a response to the ongoing onslaught in Gaza. That's why we always say that
let's be clear about this. October the 7th, there was a period before there was an onslaught on Gaza, and immediately there was an upsurge in rocket attacks by Hezbollah from your sovereign territory, from Lebanon. I'm just wondering, presumably you condemn that, and presumably you would like, but aren't in a position, your government, to stop it.
No, not at all. Hezbollah is part of the Lebanese government. They're part of the decision-making of the Lebanese government. Of course, not all Lebanese agree with the modus operandi of Hezbollah, and the Lebanese government has been calling them for self-restraint, and they have been self-restrained. But as I said, the violence in Gaza is beyond the threshold for self-restraint. And I think once there is this humanitarian pause or a ceasefire or whatever you want to call it in Gaza, things will start to de-escalate in Lebanon and elsewhere in the region.
And you said that the violence has gone beyond self-restraint. There is now conversation about Israeli action in Rafah. How would that change things in Lebanon's view?
Of course, that would only escalate the situation and will further destabilize regional stability, and it will lead to further loss of life, and it will not bring Israel security on the long term. The only thing that will bring security to all sides is a political process that starts with addressing the legitimate concerns of the Palestinian people who have been under occupation for more than 65 years now. That's why we should act fast, act immediately, stopping the bloodshed and immediately starting a credible political process that makes sure that October the 7th does not happen again.
And can you guarantee that if there was further escalation from Israel, that Hezbollah wouldn't also escalate? I mean, I suppose what I'm asking is, can you give people in the region and beyond it any guarantee that the government in Lebanon would be able to stop this from descending into more bloodshed?
We, as Lebanese government, of course, we do not want war. We have suffered enough from successive Israeli wars against our country. That's why we genuinely want to spare our country the scourge of war. But that's easier said than done when you have such a bloody conflict 200 kilometers from your borders. The contagion effect becomes very smooth and fluid. So it's so difficult to contain the Gaza conflict inside its original theater of operation in Gaza. And we're seeing how much the emotions are high even in the London streets. Even London is not spared from some repercussions of this conflict. So I think we need to go back to where it started, which is in Gaza, make sure that the killing stops, and then address the peripheral pockets and de-escalate them again.
But you can't guarantee that you would be able to control any further escalation from Hezbollah. You couldn't stop it either.
No one can guarantee. As I said, when you have such a violent conflict in Gaza, this spillover effect becomes natural, notwithstanding our efforts as Lebanese government to hold back everyone, and to make sure that calm and stability is re-established. But that's very difficult. Don't forget that Lebanon hosts around 500,000 Palestinian refugees, which were evicted out of their homes 70 years ago. What shall we tell them? What can we tell them when they see their kins being massacred in Gaza? What can we tell them?
You mentioned London. We obviously have been talking in the programme already today about the tensions in Parliament, within politics here, but also, you're right, on the streets. When you see those large-scale protests, what do you make of the way that they are being run?
I think this is a natural expression of rage and frustration when we see these massacres against civilians in Gaza, when 30,000 people lost their lives by Israeli military action, and still we don't have a ceasefire, and still we don't have a light at the end of the tunnel. It's natural that people take to the streets to express their rage. Now, of course, all these protests should respect the local laws and regulations that I think is granted. However, it's a situation that is so difficult that sometimes it gets beyond control.
Do you think it's okay for those protesters to shout, often at lone female MPs, that those MPs are responsible for genocide, that they can't hide? That's often the chant. Is it acceptable for those protesters to chant from the river to the sea, or to project their message onto buildings like the Elizabeth Tower, like Big Ben? Are those things acceptable?
I think the local regulations and laws should be respected. At the same time, one should understand the frustration when you see children and women being massacred cold-bloodedly in Gaza.
But that sounds like you think in some cases those things are acceptable.
No, I've said that local laws and regulations should be accepted. The laws of the land should be accepted.
Do you accept that Israel did have a right to defend itself after the attacks on October the 7th?
When you are in an occupying posture, how can you talk about self-defense? Occupation is the most blatant form of aggression. Don't forget that Gaza has been under occupation before October the 7th. This is not meant to justify October the 7th. We were all shocked by the blood shedding that took place on October the 7th. But we should look at it in its context, in its background. Having said this, I think now the best way forward is to start a credible political process that makes sure that October the 7th does not happen again. October the 7th and all the bloodshed that followed does not happen again. Once and for all, this conflict needs to be addressed, and needs to be addressed by political means, not by military means, by all sides.
And does your government, the Lebanese government, agree with the European Union and the UK and the United States that ultimately the solution has to be a two-state solution?
Definitely. All the Arab countries have put together what we refer to as an Arab Peace Initiative, which is a compilation of all Security Council resolutions whereby if Israel withdraws from all Palestinian occupied territories and all Arab territories, then and only then all the Arab countries will consider the conflict over and will resume normal relations. That's the essence of the Arab Peace Initiative, which was adopted back in 2002, and it's reiterated by the Arab states every year. But unfortunately, Israel has showed total disinterest in this Arab Peace Initiative.